Welcome. My name is Ileana, and I'm a librarian for the San Francisco Public Library. Thank you for joining us today. We are so happy you're here with us to celebrate Viva at the Library, an annual celebration of Latinx heritage, cultures, and traditions. San Francisco has a rich Latinx heritage that is highlighted in a diverse array of exciting programs for all ages, from Spanish bilingual story times to cooking classes, author talks to art and cultural presentations. Come celebrate with us y bienvenidos. Check out the Viva webpage of the San Francisco Public Library to see our upcoming events, find great books by Latinx authors and illustrators, and more. We are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula and continue to live, work, and play here today. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. Thank you to the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library for their generous support of this entire program series. We would not be able to do this without them. I am really excited to be able to introduce our authors tonight. We'll be having a conversation about their fantastic middle grade books. First, let me introduce Chantel Acevedo. She's the author of the novels Love and Ghost Letters, A Falling Star, The Distant Marvels, which was a finalist for the 2016 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, and The Living Infinite, hails by Booklist as a vivid and enthralling tale of love and redemption. Muse Squad, The Cassandra Curse, Acevedo's middle grade duology, was called riveting and suspenseful by School Library Journal, and the sequel, Muse Squad, The Mystery of the Tenth, follows the main characters on an unforgettable adventure. She is professor of English at the University of Miami, where she directs the MFA program. And joining Chantel, I'd like to introduce Donna Barba Higuera, who grew up in Central California, surrounded by agriculture and oil fields. As a child, rather than dealing with the regular dust devils, she preferred spending recess squirreled away in the janitor's closet with a good book. Higuera is the author of Lupe Wong Won't Dance, El Cucuy is Scared Too, and The Las Cuentista. Her middle grade and picture books are about kids who find themselves in odd or scary situations. She lives in Washington State with her family, 3 dogs, and 2 frogs. Both of our authors are members of Las Musas books. Las Musas is a collective of women and non-binary identifying on the female spectrum Latinx picture book, middle grade, chapter book, and young adult authors. Their mission is to spotlight the new contributions of Las Musas in the evolving canon of children's literature and celebrate the diversity of voice, experience, and power in our communities. Welcome, Chantel and Donna.
Thank you, Ileana.
You.
I know Donna and I were both so happy to be here. And Donna, I'm so glad to see you and spend some time with you tonight. Yes, I know it's early evening for you, but it's late at night here in Miami. So I'm glad I get to spend
about
it
as
with you.
polar opposite on the sides of
Oh
the
my
country
gosh,
as you
right?
can get.
Seattle to Miami. We couldn't get further away.
Exactly.
Oh, it's so good to be here with you.
You too.
I think for all the kids watching and some of their teachers, maybe the best way to start is introduce our books and maybe read a little bit from the books.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you want to go first or do you want me
Sure.
to?
Sure, I'll go first. So as Ileana said, I'm the author of several books for adults, but Muse Squad is my first middle grade book. And so here's Muse Squad, The Cassandra Curse, which is part 1, and Muse Squad, The Mystery of the 10th, which came out this summer, and that is part 2. And Muse Squad tells the story of Callie Martinez Silva, who is a Cuban-American girl living in Miami, who discovers that she is one of the 9 muses of classical myth when she accidentally turns her best friend into a pop star. So that's book 1. And then in book 2, she leaves Miami to spend the summer with her dad and her stepmom in New York City and her new baby brother. And the muses, 4 of whom are girls or kids like Callie, they learn that there could potentially be a 10th muse. And so that book is full of adventure and has them sort of seeking out who this 10th muse might be. So I'll read from that book because it's the most recent and it's just a little passage, and then I'll hand it off to Donna. That night, I lay awake in bed, thinking about the way my summer was turning out. When I came to New York, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Callie Martinez Silva, muse of the epic poem, eater of arroz con pollo, watcher of television, and a good friend. But since then, I'd broken curfew a bunch of times, lying to my dad and stepmom Laura. My magic had changed, and I was the storyteller. I had all this power, and I didn't exactly know what I was supposed to do with it. All my friends seemed to know who they were and what they were meant to be. Me? I didn't have a clue. I was New York Callie, Miami Callie, now Callie, future Callie, Papi's daughter, Mommy's daughter, Fernando and Mario's little sister, Maya and Rafaelito's big sister, the 9th muse. I was all these things, and yet I still didn't know what my purpose was or if I had one. Future Callie definitely had her work cut out for her. So you get a taste of Callie's voice there. How about you, Donna?
Well, so as I said, I have a few books. This is the picture book that just released. El Cucuy is Scared Too. About, if you don't know who El Cucuy is, he's about the scariest of scary things in the world. And he is sort of like the Mexican boogeyman. And in this book, it shows that even the things that are the scariest things to some of us are scared of something. And El Cucuy is afraid of change and moving and starting a new school and worried about making friends. I think we've all been through that this year, starting back to school after a little bit of a break. And so suddenly El Cucuy isn't so scary even to Ramon anymore, who's his boy. Suddenly they're both afraid of change. And a book that's just about to come out in a few weeks, The Las Cuentista. And this book is written for middle grade. It's a little, I would say upper middle grade. So maybe 10 years old and over, 9 years old and older. But a lot of adults are reading it. And so it's kind of one of those books that I think might be one that people read with families. And it's set in the future. And it's about a girl, Petra, who wants to be a storyteller. And when Earth is going to be destroyed, don't worry, it's long in the future. She is going to be going to another planet. And when she goes to this planet, she wants to be a storyteller. Her parents want her to be a scientist. And along the journey, as often happens in books, things happen and an evil empire takes over. And when Petra awakens from her deep sleep of 100 years, she discovers that all the memories of Earth and stories and everything she adored and loved have been erased from people's memories. And she is the only one who remembers. So she has to try to remind people through storytelling of what it was to be human and remind them of Earth and maybe their families. So it's a little bit more of a tension-filled book. Today, we're going to talk more about Lupe Wong Won't Dance. I've got my little place card here. And this book is about Lupe Wong, who wants to be the first female pitcher in the major leagues. And when she goes to, and if she gets straight A's this quarter or semester, her uncle, who is a groundskeeper for the Mariners, is going to introduce her to Fuli Hernandez, who is a pitcher and like her is of Mexican and Chinese descent. And so Lupe, if she got to get straight A's so she can meet him, she shows up to PE one day and finds out that they're going to be square dancing. and she's having none of it. So she's trying to eliminate square dancing. It's a lot more than that. It's not just about square dancing. It's about friendships, and it's a funny book, but so it's a lot more funny than my serious work. But I'll read to you a scene from Lupe when she's having dinner with her grandparents. Her grandparents come over for dinner, and her mother's side of the family is of Mexican descent. Her father's side of the family is from Chinese descent. So we're going to start off when they sit down at the table. And we're going to start, the whole family's around the table, including Lupe's mom, her brother Paulo, and her grandmother Salgado, and her grandma and grandpa Wong. Grace Paulo, mom says, God thank you for our grandparents who can cook. No offense, he whispers to mom. There's a small knock followed by, ow! And thank you for giving Mr. Montgomery pink eye so my algebra test is postponed. And help Lupe through puberty. And bless this food. Paulo, mom admonishes. Oh, sorry, he says and bows his head again. Amen. Mom and Bella sigh simultaneously and cross themselves. Papa and Grandma Wong are not so religious, but they nod respectively. Paulo must be hungry because he doesn't waste any time spooning pozole into his bowl. Bella smiles and pats his head. Pozole is magic. It will cure any illness or trouble you have. How much do you weigh now? Grandma Wong asks Paulo. Too skinny. Yes, too skinny, Bella says in agreement. Mom sets her chopsticks down. He's perfect. He just had his physical. Grandma Wong pops a shrimp in her mouth and stares out the window. Bella ignores mom's comment and spoons more pozole into Paulo's bowl. I put a heaping spoon of steamed eggs on top of my white rice and spoon pozole over a scoop of Mexican rice. I grab the soy sauce and drizzle barely 4 drops on top of the eggs. Too much soy sauce, Grandma Wong says. Paulo narrows his eyes at me just like Grandma, and we erupt in laughter. Ay-ya, Grandma says, shocked at our outburst. I finish scarfing it all down and stand up with my plate. Already done? Grandma reaches up and pinches my cheek again. I guess you don't need any more. I can see you've been eating a lot. Mom drops the shrimp she's holding. Bella takes my plate from my hand and sets it back down. She takes it to mouth from her own plate and sets it on mine. She pulls me back down and I take a bite before she can shove it into my mouth herself. I quickly make a muscle with my arm at Grandma Wong. Gotta keep my strength up, Grandma. Baseball season started. Bella smiles and pats my knee under the table. Grandma Wong barely lowers her voice. No money in baseball, waste of time. I slam down my chopsticks. It's one thing for her to always call me fat. It's just a Chinese grandma thing, but it's another to criticize the greatest game in history. Bella sits up tall and orgullosas her chichis to show she is competent. Baseball started in Mexico. It is in her blood, she says. Paulo snorts into his pozole. Bella's eyes are huge and her mouth is tight. I sort of appreciate the help. She's dead wrong about its origin, of course, but I'm not going to correct her. So as you can see, a lot of times in families, when you have a mix of cultures, some of you might be familiar with Mexican culture. Some of you might be familiar with Chinese culture, and sometimes when they collide, it's really interesting and funny. And so this scene is absolutely something that could have happened in my own family at certain times, and it has. So it's kind of based on that, but we all have really unique families. So that's, something that I wanted to show and showcase in my book.
I love that aspect of complex families in both our works, but especially how it plays out in that scene, right, where it goes from funny to suddenly, your main character gets, she gets upset, right, and rightfully so, she gets upset. Was that something that were you drawing from? You said it could have happened in your family. Were you drawing from experience to write, a scene like that?
Oh yeah, and a lot of these things are things that actually happened, within, and they're funny. Like sometimes you go, wow, is this real? And all of these things have happened in some way or another. And I just wanted to show, of course, when I was writing this, I never thought that it would be a book or that other people would read it. But when I wrote this scene in particular, I just kind of imagined a dinner scene of what would happen within families. And, my background is I'm Mexican American and white. So there was a mix of cultures there within, growing up with, a white parent and someone who's of Mexican descent. And my kids, it's even more complicated. Their dad is Chinese. And so I wanted, when I was writing this, it was kind of based on my kids and their experiences and how funny it actually is. But sometimes there are things that can be said that seem hurtful or they're a little complicated. And I wanted to show that there's always love. It's not meant necessarily to be that way. And we can have families that are complicated and have families from different cultures that sometimes it seems a little tense, but underlying all of that, they love each other. And grandparents, no matter where they are, they love us, and parents the same way. They can come from different backgrounds, and even children looking at that, they can have two very different grandparents and you love them just the same.
Yeah. I think complex families are so interesting, and I think important to represent in middle grade. I've got them in Muse Squad too, because my own family was complex in a different way, right? My parents divorced when I was really young. My dad wasn't around. And lots of kids sort of in the extended family, right, have divorced parents and step-parents and stepbrothers. And I have a stepsister that I love, right? And how these families can be very complicated and tense at times, but also sort of loving and wonderful, And I love that you mentioned to that difference, right? That there are sort of cultural things that are very specific, right, to families and to however that family is put together. In the second Muse Squad book, Callie has to go to spends the summer with her dad in New York, and her feelings are a little raw because her parents divorced. Dad moved away, got married almost immediately, right, to this other person, right, who is lovely, right, who is also, there is still love there, right, and these are the sort of the configurations that the adults have found for one another, and the kids sometimes feel like stuck in the middle of it, but they very much still love her.
I think probably in your book as well, like especially a child who's going from one household with a parent to another, there's another set of rules or expectations. And is that something that was in your book? Like, did she go from her mother's home to her father's and have suddenly it's like, wait, this is really different than what it is at mom's house?
That's so real, right? And I think kids who are sort of going between two homes like that, whether it's every other week or on the weekends, I think they feel that, very strongly. And certainly I gave that to Callie as well. So with mom at home, it's more easygoing. And then she goes to New York with her dad, and he's strict, right? He's strict in a way that she's no longer used to, right? She's gotten accustomed to her mother's flow, and her father's flow is a really different one. And I remember with my editor, I mentioned in the little section that I read that she breaks curfew. And the first time she breaks curfew, he takes her phone, right? He's like, castigo, like no more phone for you. And my editor was like, already? I mean, wouldn't he give her a chance? And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, he's like an old-fashioned Cuban dad. That's actually not enough what he's done, right? Like taking her phone is actually a little too mild, to how he might have reacted, and how else he might have punished her and kept her from friends or whatever, in the way I imagined him. So that's funny too. And a lot of that book is sort of her like dealing with that difference in disciplinary styles, which is real. It's very real for kids.
Well, and I think we need to point out that, a lot of times you hear, oh, that's too bad, or that's not perfect. And we all have our own home life, and yeah, it can be complicated, but it's good. It doesn't have to be bad. It's just what kids experience. And I think that a lot of times as kids, we think that our home life might not be great or might be complicated. And we don't know that other kids have complicated home lives as well. And sometimes we don't talk about those things. We get to read a book and see what's really going on with other kids. And as writers, we try to put real life into books, and we can see that it's not always perfect, but there's love, and that's your home, and it doesn't make it any better or worse than anybody else's. And I always worry that kids will, read books with these perfect families and go, wow, I wish I had that. Well, that's not realistic. Most families are complicated, and we've got a lot of combined families. And I think that kids need to know that their family is what they have to navigate, and to never feel like that it's less than anybody else's.
Yeah, absolutely. So families are tricky in both our books, but so are friendships.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think that, in your book, you've got your character who is suddenly kind of whisked into this different world of who she is, and this different, what her real, not persona, but like what she can become. Luckily, she gets to do this with other people, other muses like herself. So can you speak a little bit to that, about her learning to make friends with others who may not be like her, have the same background, and what that was like?
Yeah, there are a couple of tensions there for Callie, because especially in the first book, she accidentally magically turns her best friend into a pop star and starts to feel that she's lost her best friend, right? And this is me pulling from my own sort of middle school memories of having a best friend who suddenly in middle school became very popular. Like suddenly she was like the school rock star, and feeling, oh my God, I'm left in the dust, right? Like suddenly like her social sphere was different from mine, and what happened to our friendship, right? We're being tugged in different directions, and trying to navigate that, and trying to rediscover what you liked about each other, right, in the first place, and why you became, best friends, and getting to the essence of that. So she's dealing with losing this one best friend on the one hand, and feeling sort of guilty about that, and then making all these new friends who are completely diverse and global, and they have all these very different personalities, and they have to work together as a team. So there's a lot of compromise there with them, because they have their goals as muses that they have to accomplish together, and they might not always see eye to eye. And so that was really fun to navigate sort of those complexities with Callie in both books. Yeah,
I think that, in Lupe Wong Won't Dance, she has a lot of complicated friendships too. And Lupe isn't always the most likable character. Sometimes she makes a lot of mistakes. And one thing I wanted to showcase, because a lot of people will read it and they'll go, she's not always likable. And I'm like, yeah, she's growing, and part of what I wanted to show is that even in her friendships, she makes really bad mistakes. She takes her friends for granted, and sometimes she uses them to get to her goal. And so she'll, have them do tasks for her when really she just assumes they're going to do it because they're her friends. And she discovers along the way that she's making mistakes. And one thing I really wanted to show is that that's part of growing. And especially when we're in, middle school and going into high school and navigating friendships. And sometimes we lose friends and it really hurts. Like, friends will move on to other friends. It happens to all of us, but when it happens to us, we feel like we're the only person in the world that it's happening to. But when it happens to Lupe, it's really hard. And she has to look at her behavior and go, wait, what did I do? Maybe I was part of the problem. And just to learn to forgive ourselves and herself. And I think that we need to remember that along the way, we're going to make a lot of mistakes with our friendships and other things. And we have to learn to go, wow, I made a mistake, but I can do better, and I'm going to forgive myself and move on. And if we always just think about that mistake we made and we dwell on it, and that's all we think about, that's not what we should do. We should learn from it and say, okay, I'll do better next time, and move on. And we should do that with our friendships. And one thing I love about Lupe, though, is that she has many different friendships. She has her friendship with her friend Andy, she and Andy have been friends for a long time. And she also is friends with a boy down the street whose name is Niles. And so she's in there. They're all very different. And I think that that's one thing I wanted to show as well, that it's okay. Middle school's tough because a lot of times people run in cliques. It's okay to have all kinds of friends, and friends that are different from you, or have different hobbies or activities. And, friendships can be a lot deeper than just, kind of going, okay, this clique is this way or this clique is that way. There might be that quiet person that you never talk to, or you might be that quiet person, and it's okay
Mhm.
to make friends with someone who you may not have thought you ever would be friends with, and it could create a lifelong friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that at least in, you know, in my book, at the sort of towards the end, I'm gonna spoil it a little bit, but she gets her best friend back. It would be kind of sad if they were like enemies forever, right? So like she gets her best friend back, and part of that is that they apologize to one another, and the power of an apology, I think, is really really important. And I'm always shocked at how there are some people who really struggle with apologies, right? They have a hard time saying I'm sorry. But I think once you learn how to do that in a way that's genuine, right, and it's thoughtful, it can really heal things, right? When you think of a friendship has gone bad, what you really need to do is communicate. And the power of an apology, I think, is really, really important there too.
I agree. And
Yeah.
I think, when those apologies happen, sometimes it doesn't mean that you agree on what happened. You can still be that we just don't agree on this one thing, and you apologize and you move on in your friendship, and you just know, okay, hey, you know what? We're not going to agree on that thing. It doesn't mean that we're not going to be friends or we can never be friends again. We just know that, okay, that's something we're not going to agree on. And we have to, learn to just respect that the other person has a different opinion, or,
and accept each other's differences too.
Absolutely.
Is important as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what else both our books have in common is a sense of activism.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lupe's a bit of a social justice warrior, and that's kind of what gets her into trouble. She's trying to ban square dancing, but we find out almost immediately that because she is Mexican American and Chinese, she was upset about there being one bubble on the Scantron where it said choose one. And she's like, wait a minute, why do I have to choose one? I'm equal parts of these things. And that came out of how I felt as a teacher, or when I was young, I asked a teacher, why do I have to choose one bubble? And she goes, well, that's just the way it is. You have to choose one. And I was like, well, not just one. And it was very odd to me. So she becomes an activist for that. She doesn't like the dress code where girls have to wear shorts that are to their fingertips, but boys, it doesn't matter. And so I wrote, that was something that happened with my kids, and they were mad about it. I'm like, you know what? That's right. So she's a bit of an activist and finds things that to her, they don't pass the smell test. And she's like, okay, if this is just feels wrong to me, she can't just accept it. And so she is constantly trying to figure out ways to either get something banned or bring it up with the school board or bring it up with the school. Unfortunately for Lupe, she gets so excited about these things and that she forgets that sometimes you have to take other people into consideration. It's not just about yourself. It's great to have causes. It's wonderful to do that, but you want to do it in a way that if you are going to enlist the help of your friends, you do it politely and you ask, you don't tell. And so, but yeah, social activism, I think it's important that if something doesn't feel right to you, I know sometimes as a kid, you feel powerless to change something. And this was something, when my kids came home and said, well, we have to square dance. And not only do we have to square dance, we have to square dance only with a boy, and we only have to square dance with the person who asks us. So, and we have to say yes. And so for my daughter, I felt so bad for her. She never even held a boy's hand. And suddenly she's in middle school and she's going to have to dance with a boy and hold his hand. It just all felt very awkward to her. And she was powerless to change it. Her grade depended on it. So that's kind of how I like, okay, who could stand up for those of us who felt like we felt like, I was like, wait a minute, I had to do that too. So Lupe Wong was a character who I'm like, okay, she's going to stand up for all the things that I was too afraid to stand up for. And it's hard. There are things all the time that you go, wow, I really want to I don't think this is fair. But is it, when you're a kid, it's like, you feel like, can I say anything? Can I do anything? Is anybody even going to listen to me if I do?
Yeah, no, that's really powerful, and something that always intrigued me about adolescence, right? Which is that incredible sense of passion right? For causes, for for justice, and not a lot of power in the world, you know, or at least power that's sort of visible to you as a kid, right? You can't access it. And so, of course, there are ways to do it, and doing it in the ways that Lupe learns to over the course of the book, right, is really healthy. When I was writing Muse Squad, I wanted to, because it was set in Miami, and I'm married to a scientist, and so there's always like science conversations happening in my house, and I knew that I wanted climate change to be a part of the story as well, right? Because it's something that kids globally are worried about, and kids especially in coastal areas like Seattle and like Miami are worried about, in really specific ways. I wanted to be that to be part of the story, and so the muses are tasked with inspiring fated ones, right? People who are destined for greatness, whether it's in the arts or it's in some other field. And so Callie's first assignment is actually a classmate, Maya Rivero, who is sort of like the science geek of the school, and she kind of dresses funny and she's goofy, but she's passionate, particularly about climate change. And so Callie and the other muses in the Muse Squad, who are the kids of the 9 muses, are tasked with inspiring Maya and making sure she has a friend, because she's destined for greatness. And so when you are 11, what that means is making sure she gets to that science fair and that she does a good job at the science fair, you know? And so I was able to, Callie herself is not an activist, but she's the support system, right, for the activist in her life. And you see that actually in both books. And I thought that was important too, because you might not be that kid who feels maybe brave enough to be on the front line, right, of an issue, but you can certainly support, right, those who do, if you agree with them, right? And whether that's help them make posters or even tell them good job, I think that's great, right? Like being that support system can be really important too. I think that's a vital position to hold. And so the muses are, they were interesting to write because they're not front and center, and they're not the heroes of the story, right? Like they're the makers of heroes, and so they're sort of in the shadows, and they're helping people like do what they need to do in the world. And so that was really fun to write.
I love that, because I think that a child who would read your book would say, okay, maybe I don't have to be the one on the front line. Maybe I'm shy. Maybe that's not my strong suit, but I can help and, you know, say I can inspire other people, or I can be a support system for a friend. And it, you know, like you said, obviously you want to believe in what it is they're doing, but even just, you know, activism sometimes is knowing that, you know, saying, wow, that's their cause, but I do believe in it, but I want to help. And that's a great way to be proud of yourself and to find those things that are important to you and to help others too. It doesn't always have to be your cause. And that's a great way to look at it. And I think kids will, if they read your book, will go, wow, okay, I can do that. So what a great message.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I always think of Mr. Rogers, right? That was, he was always his famous quote, "Look for the helpers." And sometimes, I mean, I think so many kids' books, especially books that are fantasy books, right? Like they're, especially the magical books, like you are the chosen one. And so like a spotlight on that one kid. And these girls are magical, right? But they're not the goddesses and the gods, right? Like they're taking that back seat because they're there sort of as an assist. And I think it's an important role. Yeah. And one you don't see very often. Oh, Ileana's back.
Yeah, there's been some really fun, heartwarming chatter, both in chat on YouTube and here, just empowering multiracial families and kids, just showcasing that diversity and talking and an appreciation of like the friendships and the families and the activism. So I wanted no questions yet, but I wanted to just share that there's folks that are out there that appreciate the discussion around those pieces. And I really appreciated how you both went into depth a little bit around the growth of your characters, because I do feel like that's something like that's very real, right? And that's very much a piece of the middle grade experience. It's very real to have likable days and unlikable days, whether they're internal or external. So I do have a question about writing process. if you both are willing to share a little bit about how you go about writing, if it's changed from when you wrote these books, and depending on what you both have coming up.
Well, my writing process is normally I get like just the spark of an idea, and it always starts that way. If I try to force an idea for a book, it doesn't happen. It's normally, and it can be something weird and bizarre. Like the Las Cuentista, I was listening to an NPR, it can happen at any time where you hear something, but it was a writing prompt, and it was write about, take a traditional fairy tale and make it sci-fi. And even though the book, I mean, it's considered science fiction, it's also dystopian. I just wrote a short story. And then after that, I write down plot. I'm like, wow, this would make a good novel. So I wrote down plot points. And then as I start writing and I start following my little plot points, the characters start forming in my mind. And so as I'm writing them, it never follows the plot points because the characters start just, and it sounds so weird, but it really happens. The characters start taking the story in another direction. And sometimes as a writer, you're going, wait, that's not where we're supposed to be going. We're supposed to go over here. But it's always more interesting in the end if you allow the characters to kind of they play like a movie in my head, and I just write down what they're doing. And sometimes I'm like, oh, don't do that. And they just do it anyway. And so it's always interesting. But most of the time when I'm writing, the characters, people ask me a lot, are the characters you, or are the characters someone you know? And they're not. They sometimes they're pieces of them that remind me of somebody, but they're never someone in particular. They always form themselves. And so there are different types of writers who write plot, and others that they're called pantsers, where pantsers just means you just write whatever. Mine are always character driven, where the characters kind of come into play, and then they just, it sounds silly, but they kind of write the story themselves. And once I have the character in my mind, it actually is very easy to write the story.
Yeah, I typically begin with character as well. I think almost everything I've written, including the adult books, begin with character. The difference with Muse Squad and everything I'd written before, those books had come to me sort of in pieces, right? Like I like this historical moment, and then I like this, this theme, and it slowly the tapestry starts to come together until finally, right, I have the idea. Muse Squad, the idea came like a bolt of lightning. That's never happened to me before. It probably will never happen again. And I like to say that it was actually muse given, because there's no other explanation. But for real, I was in a museum. I was at the V&A, which is Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And I made that muse headquarters in the book, sort of as an homage to this moment. But I was visiting with my family and waiting for the kids to use the bathroom. And there was this beautiful sculpture of a muse. And I went to take a picture of it. And the idea just came to me, which was, what if they'd been children? Like, what if the muses had been children? And that was it. And so I started to sort of just frantically wrote it. And museum, the word museum comes from the muse, right? Museums, right? It's a place where everything is inspired. And so I'm frantically writing in my notes app on my phone. And over the course of that vacation, sort of plotting it in my head. And I try not to start a project, like start actually drafting until I know how it ends. Because I used to just go by the seat of my pants for the first 2 books, and it was so painful that I decided never to do it again. So I spent the rest of that trip just dreaming about who these kids were. But yeah, it felt very, very like a very lucky moment. It probably will never happen.
More of those moments, because the way that it happened, just organically, you were in this every day. You're going to have another moment where you're going to go, oh my gosh, here's another one. You better have your notebook handy, because it's just going to happen, and you're going to have to write it down.
It was wild. And it typically, though, doesn't. Typically, like, ideas build for a long time in my head. Like, they just percolate and they start adding layers like an onion, and then they're good. So yeah.
That's so cool. I love both Callie and Lupe for different reasons. Like with Callie, I was like, when she would go to, I'm not going to give spoilers. So when she would not be where her mom thought she was, she would say like, if my mother only knew that I was however far away. And it was just so real, right? And with Lupe, with her mother, she was really just trying to take that measured approach as much as she could until she couldn't anymore, around the different pieces, around the dancing and around the boys and around baseball. Like it was just like, it was so fun to watch, to be with those characters. So thank you both for creating them. What's next for you, if you can share?
I think that's tricky for writers. I'm trying to remember what I can and can't say. I have stuff in the works. So I will be working on another 2 picture books, and that I can tell you that's it. I can't say more than that. And another middle grade young adult that may or may not be in the same universe as the Las Cuentista. And so the Lupe I think about all the time, and I started writing another Lupe book, and I decided that Lupe's journey in middle school might need to be over. If we revisit Lupe, I think we need to revisit her in high school and have a young adult book. And so I had written about half of another Lupe, and it felt a little bit like she had closure for that moment, and trying to keep her in that moment, just, it wasn't feeling right. It was funny, but it just didn't feel like there was more growth to happen. So I'm like, we need to throw her into a high school situation. But yeah, I'm working on something that hopefully it will be announced soon, but I can't really say anything just yet. But right now I'm, next on the 12th is when the Last Cuentista comes out. So I'm kind of focusing on that. It's like having a baby. When your book arrives, it's like having a book baby.
Absolutely. I can't wait. Next week. Yeah. And I love the idea of Lupe in high school. Lupe Wong at the prom still won't dance.
Oh my God, you just wrote the title of my book. That would be hilarious.
Still not dancing.
Okay, that's
dancing at the prom.
Yeah.
I can actually announce something, and it's true. It's tricky. Sometimes you're asked, you're like, I have a thing and I can't tell you, but I can announce. And it's a new middle grade coming out next fall. So Halloween 22, and it's called The Curse on Spectacle Key. And it's about a boy named Frank Fernandez, whose parents are in the home restoration business. So they turn trains into houses and old abandoned churches and all kinds of funky shapes. And they've decided they're moving to a lighthouse in the Florida Keys, except this lighthouse is the spookiest lighthouse ever. And Frank runs into a mysterious girl who may or may not be a ghost. And together they're going to try to figure out, what is this curse on Spectacle Key? And I'll add that he has a Great Dane, and her name is Mary Shelley, because Frank is obsessed with Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein. So look for that next fall.
Oh, that sounds fun. And it's coming out at kind of Halloween time.
Yes.
Perfect
yeah, I hope so.
timing. Oh, I love it.
Thank you. Yeah,
very cool. Very cool. Thanks for sharing and not doing spoilers if you can't. I appreciate that. I think both of your books, we have them with the San Francisco Public Library, or these middle grade books, I think all of your books. And so folks can check them out or purchase them at their favorite local bookstore that they want to support. And is there anything else that you all would like to share? And in the chat, there's folks that are just applauding and thanking and just like so excited. So just wanted to share that too. But if there's anything else you'd like to share with the audience, feel free.
If there are any teachers out there, you can go to my website. It's you can go to either Donna Barba Higuera and it'll pull up, or DB Higuera and it'll pull up. And I have a teaching guide there for Lupe, and there will be a teaching guide for the Las Cuentista coming up very soon. And I forgot, Lupe Wong No Baila, it's coming out in Spanish, and it's been delayed because books got stuck in shipping containers. It's a real problem, but it will be out in, I think now the new release date is November. And that is wonderful for me. And the Las Cuentista is already being translated, so it will be in Spanish as well. And just being able to have a book that you can read in both English and Spanish would have been so wonderful for me when I was younger. There just really weren't books like that were translated. So I just, it makes me so happy. So yeah, if somebody, wants to read it in both language or an ESL class, that will be in Spanish in November.
Oh, that's great. And same for me. If you go to chantelacevedo.com, there's a teacher's guide for the first Muse Squad book. And I also do virtual classroom visits as well. And yeah, please do check it out.
Well, that was amazing. I'm glad you both were able to share your teacher guides, because there definitely are some educators out there that are watching right now and that are tuning in. So thank you so much. And thanks for saying yes to yet another virtual event. We really appreciate it, especially being in San Francisco and touching Seattle and Miami. It's a joy and a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for connecting us across the country. I love it.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. One of my hermanas from Las Musas. It's wonderful we don't get to see each other that often. So this was a great opportunity, and I had so much fun.
Same here. Thank you so much, Ileana, for having us. And thank you to everyone for watching.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching and joining us today. And if you love today's program, be sure to check out our calendar. There are more opportunities to engage in cultural programs like this to celebrate Viva Latinx Heritage Month. Next week, we'll explore hot chocolate traditions throughout Latin America, so be sure to register for that. Take a look at our book lists that have both Chantel and Donna's books listed as well, and take good care of yourselves. Stay safe, and we hope to see you all at another library program soon. Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.